Hello again, and welcome into another edition of Interrupting Racism. I'm Brian Prowitz, the host and creator of this idea, because I think it's really important that we share the perspective of leaders from around the state of Oregon who are doing amazing things for people all over this state, who are leaders within their own industry and leaders in our state, doing great work on behalf of Oregonians everywhere. Just about everybody who is on Interrupting Racism has a tie to, or who has been through and is now a senior fellow of the American Leadership Forum of Oregon. The reason that that's important is because the efforts of ALF and the work that is done by the organization basically changed my life. And I'm trying to feed some good stuff back out into the atmosphere at a time when it seems like all we get is anger and divisiveness. And today I want to welcome to the program a new friend of mine, Libra Forde. Libra is joining us today from the Portland area. She is the COO of Self Enhancement Inc., which we will talk all about as we go along, Libra. But welcome to the program.
Thank you, Brian. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for even thinking of me. And yes, ALF changed my life too.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, the whole point of ALF was to put leaders in the state of Oregon from different networks into a cohort where understanding and respect and, if you're really lucky, love would develop to a level where, even though Libra and I, though we did meet in Roseburg when you had your turn here, we've really never met, but we know we have some things in common just because of the ALF experience.
Yeah.
And so it makes it easy when you pick up the phone and you start talking to have a little bit of understanding for each other. But that's enough about me and that. I want to talk about the things you do, Libra. The phone call we had the other day really inspired me. It really encouraged me. I've been telling other people about just a tiny drip of what we're going to get on the program today. And so I'm excited about that. But the first thing is, give us an idea of what Self Enhancement Incorporated is, Self Enhancement Inc., SEI, what you do, and maybe a little bit about what drives your passion for that kind of work.
Yeah, so Self Enhancement Incorporated, which is also known as SEI, is a multi-service organization, nonprofit. We focus on Black youth and families, and we do it in 3 different ways. We do in-school programming, where we attach to students in 5 different school districts and make sure they cross the finish line with success. And then we do after-school programming, where we expose them to new opportunities, potentially creating our next leaders of the world. And then we have summer programming, and all of that is also done not without supporting their families, because we know that a child can only be successful as their family is. So we do wraparound services like housing and domestic violence support and utility support. So all of that encompasses the SEI family, and we do that for over 17,000 kids each year.
Wow. And did you say African American children? You say kids of color? Who's the target audience for you?
Our target audience is African American, Black children and families.
One thing that was new to me in my experience with ALF was the discussion around how important it was for children to have teachers that look like them, culturally, ethnically, and the like. What is a little bit of an introduction to just that concept?
Yeah, there's only 2% Black people in Oregon. And so our organization, being culturally specific, we usually are the representation in a school for a kid. Many times they're in a school and they don't see anyone that looks like them, maybe a couple friends. And what that does is it diminishes their thought that they can be successful. We mimic what we know. We mimic what is comfortable to us. In many other cultures, even though they're just as significant and just as important and valuable, if you can't see yourself in it, it's very difficult to see the value in your purpose and feel like you belong. So representation is so important for all. And it's not just important for the Black or the Indigenous or any child of color in the room. It's important for all children, because when you see different in front of you all the time, when you move on in your life and the room is different, all of a sudden you know how to be. without interrupting in a way that is harmful, because you have learned what it means to be indifferent instead of learning it later in life after you've been filled with this idea that you are the only one.
I relate to that. Well, I don't know how I can relate to that, because I think about that as my own upbringing, in my own childhood. I wanted to be a radio broadcaster, and so I had a guy, and I'm from Seattle, so Dave Niehaus was like my muse, right? Well, he was a white guy, and other than athletes growing up, I don't know if I ever saw a person of color doing the thing I wanted to do, and I said, "Oh, I want to be that because of that person."
Mm-hmm.
But if you flip that around, it would mean the world to be able, and actually the people I mimicked to try to get into broadcasting, I tried to be just like them. And so, and also you can see it can be done. And I think you touched on that as well. It's like, I'm Black, I'm African-American, that person's successful in that. Let's say if you wanted to get into broadcasting and you see Ahmad Rashad or Bryant Gumbel or somebody like that, you go, oh, he made it. And it works as for women too.
Right. Absolutely.
So all of those
things. Representation is everything. And the thing that most people of dominant culture don't realize is the confidence of dominant culture comes from the fact that they have representation. That's the root of it. Everything is built on, well, yeah, of course I can do that. That's the concept, because that's all you see. Versus another child that looks different, it's never, of course, I can do that first, until someone tells them that or guides them that way, because they just don't see it in the environment that they're in.
Yeah. And I think about all the people that helped me along the way saying I could do it. And it really didn't matter, in my opinion right now, as we're talking about that. I don't think it mattered so much what skin color they had or what. It was just them saying, hey, you can do it. It wouldn't have mattered to me. It was that encouragement. But if it, in this situation, as you say, with the representation element. So anyway, that's really
a huge part of it is marketing, right? So it's not even the intentional work of like a teacher representing you or looking like you or similar to someone in your family. It's also the marketing tool that's out there. Marketing has this way of convincing the mind that only a select few can do this, right? And even in your example about the broadcaster was someone that looked like you, but then there was all these Black basketball players. If you take a group of children, most of the Black children will probably lean towards the basketball players because that's what they see. That looks like my uncle, that looks like my auntie, that looks like people I know. I can do that, and they tell me I can. I don't know anything about that other side. Probably not a lane I want to go to. And in life, as humans, we don't naturally go to something that's difficult or different because our world has been built on do what's easy. And so as a child, their first instinct isn't to just be like, let me just ruffle every feather and go that way. They want to go the way that the water seems smooth and everybody else is going that way. So let me just go. And psychologically, there's a lot of things that we can do to help children build the boldness and make them emboldened enough to say, I can do whatever I dream of. But that takes time. Marketing does not help us infuse the energy of boldness in all children, because only a certain few are selected to be seen a certain way. Things are definitely starting to rotate and become different, and I'm excited about the things that I'm seeing on TV, but the imagery is just so important, and it infests the mind in a way that is just not helpful.
I love having this conversation. I hope that people, by the way, we can see your comments here and we can share them as well. So if you have thoughts, please share them either on my personal Facebook page or the Interrupting Racism Streamcast, either on Facebook or YouTube. We love sharing those things. So many thoughts popping through my head. This is where systemic racism begins to really show up as well, because you talk about kids wanting to naturally trend toward, okay, well, I mean, that door appears to be open. I'm going to go this direction.
Mhm.
What doors are open? And we both agreed that Alf's changed our lives. I think my life started changing mostly when I started to say, I might be part of the problem. Like, am I part of the problem?
Yeah.
What? I mean, being able to just say that out loud and begin to explore that can give you a whole nother way of looking at everything and learning a ton.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And the door opening example, I love that. History rotates in different directions. And sometimes what I've seen in my reflection on history, you have this time where the door opens, right? And then more people of color seem to get through. And that's what we celebrate, right? Because something significant happens because the door has opened, because usually if some type of civil unrest, you talk about the civil rights movement, then all of a sudden the door opens a little bit. You have a few who come through. We celebrate that as if things have changed, and the door shuts again. And then you have this other rotation of nothing happening. And then here we go again with civil unrest, and people get through again and we get excited. The key is that the door has to stay all the way open. In fact, we don't need doors, and we don't need walls, and we don't need windows or anything. People need to walk freely no matter what their skin color is. And that's where in this nation systems have been built where the doors are regulated by systems in a way that are harmful. They open and close based on what the system wants to allow, versus is just saying, you know what, we need this infusion of all in order for us all to grow, and not allow a system to break up this natural infusion of diversity. And I talked to you about this before. The 60s was a great time. It was a movement of the mind. People were writing things down. We had acts that were moved. We had, laws that were infused, and those were great things. But the reality is that nobody believed those laws. No one felt those laws. No one wanted to actually act on those laws. And they shut the doors after all those papers were signed. Now, here we are now on Black Lives Matter and the civil unrest during a pandemic, and the hearts are now involved because we're all impacted. We're all at home and we're all involved. And hopefully what I hope to see is that now that the mind and the heart is coming together, that maybe people can start really feeling the need for this diversity, feeling the need for a systemic racism to be broken up, and keeping doors open and shattering walls and getting rid of barriers.
Because hopefully we're seeing the value of diversity. And I think maybe where that analogy starts to break down is for people who then, and everything right now is being politicized and weaponized, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So here you have this effort around Black Lives Matter. It leads to protests in Portland. It leads to people in my network in Southern Oregon to look at Portland, go look at that zoo. Why did that happen? Blame the governor, blame whoever you want. Like, look at the mess in Portland. Of course, the perception was that the entire city was on fire.
Right.
And while there were certainly dust ups, from what I understand, my friends in Portland say, yeah, there were places where that happened, but it wasn't total anarchy like some people were led to believe. No. You're laughing because it's like,
No, I mean, it's comedy to me, right? Because people say, oh my God, Portland's on fire, or wherever else there were, political stand-ups, it's on fire. The reality is we've been on fire. Maybe it's not a literal fire, but anytime you have people being harmed based on a system, it's a fire. Now, we don't all see it. It's the same thing as like your house is on fire, and maybe if I'm the neighbor, I care. But if I'm 10 blocks away, I might look at the smoke in the sky. Oh man, that's terrible, and keep it moving. The thing about the pandemic, you couldn't keep it moving. It's in your face. And this fire impacts all of us. And the reality is, when there's a fire in this country, if Black people, if Indigenous people, if people of color are on fire in systematic racism, we're all on fire. You can only hide for so long. It will impact you. Whether it's the kid that is no longer being serviced and getting what they need because of their color of their skin, and now they drop out of school and they burglarize your house because they need something, we are all connected. And until we realize that, we will always be on fire. always.
That is powerful. And I wanted to just sort of sit there for half a second, because that's new information for some people watching this.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought it forward with the passion that you did.
Yeah. Yeah. And I tell people all the time, your kid is my kid. You never know how my kid will impact you. For example, we just had an administrator of this country that impacted all of us. Whatever your political views are, that human being impacted all of us. So think about it. Every kid, if they don't have what they need, they become your next president. They will impact you. So we have work to do. We have to begin to see the connectivity now. We cannot keep thinking that being divisive is the answer to our country healing and being progressive. The only thing that will heal us is for us to realize your life is important to mine and my life is important to yours, because everything we do connects somehow at some point. Now, for me, I don't particularly like the last president. So for me, whoever raised him, I'm pretty damn upset about it. I'm upset about all the people in his life that didn't adjust his walk in his life, because I got impacted by it in a negative way. Don't appreciate any of you. You all should have stood up.
So I want to talk about your experience with kids as well, because this is where some really big encouragement comes for me. Because I asked you in general, and this is kind of I guess I would ask any teacher, anybody who has experience with kids these days, in general, just a really ridiculous, vague question. How do you think they're doing? And talk about, lumping everybody together and stereotyping. But what do you see out of the kids right now that you're around when it comes to some of these big social issues that we're talking about as adults?
Yeah.
Most of the time we're talking about it as adults.
Yeah.
You and I are talking about it as adults.
Yeah. I think that as adults, we think that kids are the problem, but really we're the problem. Adults are the problem. We have a lot of hangups that we displace on kids, and we say that all these things are their issues when really there are issues. From a kid's standpoint, I think that there are kids who are doing okay. This is their world. They're kind of used to it. And then there's kids that are not doing okay for many reasons. And some of it goes back to the clear lines of the have and have-nots in our country. There are kids sitting in homes with no food, and the only food they ever got was in the schools. Now, of course, some school districts are doing a great job of making sure they eat and all those things, but they're in unsafe homes. There are kids that have learning disabilities that don't have parents at home who are able to support them in it. And so all of those and many more, there's many more examples of children that are not doing okay. But I think the majority of the children, from the just general education lens, this is their world. Being online is not the end of the world for them. Being online for adults is the end of the world. And it's interesting how, as an adult, we become our parents. And our parents once, complained about things, and oh my God, I think about the television and how the television was evil and no one wanted that. And now you can't walk in a household and not see one. In fact, when people tell you they don't have a television, you're kind of like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Times change, and I think kids are good at being resilient in them. I am concerned about the kids that are not safe and have social emotional needs, but I think most kids they're hanging out and they're being really, really strong about it.
So Libra Forde is the COO of Self Enhancement Inc. So that would suggest the fact that you've described what you do at SCI would mean that the systems in place right now within the school district or even the ESD may or may not be meeting all the needs of those kids. Is you basically filling in a gap that exists?
Yeah, so self-enhancement is always filled in this gap, right? I think that we fill in a social emotional gap. We fill in the needs of the cultural gap that school districts have never done a great job of doing. The pandemic and the closure of schools, I think, has exposed the gap in ways that are concerning for our nation. But I also think exposure is a great way to have change. because it's one thing to have an agency like self-enhancement that's been around for 40 years doing it, right? But we've been doing it in the dark. Many people don't know that we do it. Many people don't know how we do it. We get our own funding from most of it. But in all of that, no one really understood it, right? Where now you got this glaring light saying, whoa, schools are not sufficient for the whole child. So how do we make them sufficient for the whole child? And this, of course, is differently impacted for different cultural groups. But the fact is that the way that we've been educating kids for 100+ years has never changed. How could we take our most precious gems of our nation and teach them the same way we taught them 150 years ago and think that it's actually going to be effective? I think that's a little bit of a reach. So we gotta take this exposure and see what we can do with it, right? Like there's a lot of innovative things happening in the pandemic that I think we can probably gravitate to and use as innovation for forward-thinking education in our nation. But it's time for a change. It's the last monopoly of our country. We gotta change it.
Is the incorporation of online and technology part of that, do you think?
Absolutely. You know, other nations have been doing hybrid models for years and are way ahead of us academically in terms of their children. And also, it allows a child to be more than just a student behind a desk. In Hawaii, I helped start a school, which was a hybrid model school. And one of the things that we knew was there's kids there who are beyond the desk. There were professional surfers who could not be in school all day. They needed to catch the wave. That's what they did. They still wanted to be educated. They still wanted to do all the things they had to do to get their diploma, but they deserved to be on the water. That was their purpose in life. And I think that us not being open to different education has also hindered our innovation in our country, hindered our ability to create just phenomenal leaders by just putting kids in a box and not allowing them to be their full self.
Quite a bit of difference, though, right, between the model you described in Hawaii and what we're going through right now.
Oh yeah, but we're moving towards a hybrid model in the state, in most states, right? Like it's a mandatory hybrid, so it's not based on a kid's specialty, but it's a way for us to at least see, could this be an option for the future of education? Not the only option, but a option.
Yeah. So I think one of the places that's really interesting when it comes to online learning and our just the general state of the economy, and you talk about trying to reach underserved populations, whether that's a very rural, very poor white kid in rural Douglas County, or an underserved African-American child up in the Clackamas area, but how the combination of the need of technology, Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff, it's not just an afterthought among us who take it for granted. There are so many people that wouldn't be able to even benefit from that because of how rural or how their socioeconomic status is. How do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, I've heard of some really innovative things, though, in some of our rural counties here in Oregon. Like we've put some internet in buses, and they've been parking in areas that have helped. I know that our legislative is really trying to work on how we improve access, not just for our kids, but adults, right? Like there's so much about access now in the internet in everything you do. And so if you don't have that, it limits you no matter who you are. If you don't have access, you can't get to a lot of things in the nation right now. So we have a lot of work to do with that. I think there are some people who are on top of it. I think that some of the innovation that we've discovered during the pandemic is important, giving kids a hotspot, not making a poor family pay for it. The school district provides that. These are all examples that I think we should take forward. Like we have to continue to do these things.
And from what you said earlier, would you agree that the success or failure of those kids in rural Douglas County are as important to you as your kids that you meet with every day at SEI?
Absolutely. And I would say the same thing I said earlier about the hybrid model. I don't think that it's the answer for all, But when I think about rural kids that potentially may need a job or want to work on the farm or work in the lumberyard during the day and be able to do school at night, absolutely. If that's their choice, they should be able to do that without feeling like I can't get a degree because it's either this or that. You should be able to make the choice to do both if you choose to. I think that this is a movement for education, and we need to take heed to it, how we can really represent all and help all get to the finish line.
I'm having possibly a glitch in the matrix right now. My screen has frozen. I hope it pops back. I hope everything you just said and we're saying right now is okay. It's the first time this has happened.
Uh-oh.
But we might be crashing. We're gonna keep talking just in case we are not crashing.
I'm checking your line to see if it's actually up and running. Let's see.
Can you see me? Am I looking okay? Am I moving around on your screen or am I frozen?
Let's see right now. No, we're talking. I see us.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll keep going.
Well, you're frozen, but I'm moving on the live stream.
Oh, great. Can I be heard on the live stream?
I can hear you right now. I don't know. Let's see.
All right. We'll keep going. I'm afraid my browser's about to crash.
You can be heard.
Okay, good. I want to shift over to just kind of the bigger social issues that are in front of you still. One of the things you and I have talked about a couple times now is that it seems like COVID, the controversy around still COVID, access to businesses, masks, no masks, the vaccine process. A lot of people are very upset that teachers right now got pushed ahead of our 80 plus elders who hopefully will be getting vaccinated very, very soon. Lots of things to get caught up in other than some of the momentum that was built around racial equality in our country for the past few months. How important, or where, the question I have for you is that you live this every day. It's not like the news does shift away from certain things, but where is equality and fairness and access and some of the things we've been talking about, open doors for people of color? Where is that still on the radar for you? And I guess it'd be obvious to say it's still really, high up there because you're a Black woman. So it's never going to really go away. No. But as you look at the way the media is treating everything, this is not the top thing anymore. It's a lot about COVID and still politics. How are you feeling about all that?
Not surprised. I think that being Black in America, that there's moments that they highlight us. Like I said earlier, the door opens, they let a few in, and then the door closes. So I'm not surprised that it's not a priority anymore. I think that there are people in the community, boots on the ground, who are trying to keep this messaging alive. And I'm appreciative to them every single day. I feel like the work we do, we've been protesting for 40 years at SEI. It's just not on the streets. So there's good work that's going to continue to be done. It's unfortunate that it's not in the limelight the way that it was before, because I felt a lot of people had an opportunity to learn from it. But the work doesn't stop. So I'm not surprised that we're not in the headlines anymore, but I also know the work doesn't stop because it can't stop. We're all moving this mountain one grain of sand at a time. My ancestors moved a little bit, their children moved a little bit, it keeps going each generation, and we're all determined to keep moving this mountain. If this has been your fight, you're still fighting. We're just not on the news anymore.
But you do feel like the needle has moved a little bit, right? We talked about how it's a little bit more on the conscience.
Yeah, now. I think that is definitely, this movement to me is more about the heart. And I feel like there's more people who have had their heart moved. And I call it the army of the soldiers of fighting against racism. We've added a few more soldiers to that army because people have been moved. And anytime you add more soldiers or warriors or whatever you want to call it to the fight, that's a good thing because you have more strength. I just don't think it is the movement to really set this straight. We can't just stop here. We have to keep moving this needle, keep moving this mountain, keep gathering all the soldiers that we need to make sure we can truly see what's behind the mountain. Because I believe that if we can get this done, there's beauty on the other side for all of us. I really believe that. It's what gets me up every day. As much as I know that there are people on this planet who see me, who hate me just because of what I look like, I'm not ever depleted by that, because I know that one day this will be different.
And what is done? What is we want to get this done, or when this is done, how beautiful it will be.
Yeah, I think done is when we're not survived by social constructs of race. That's when we're done. Right now, all of my ancestors and myself probably will be survived by this concept of racism. When that stops, when people like that look like me can pass away and they're not survived by it, then we're done.
How do you measure that? How will you just know?
I think that this nation will have a level of peace that it longs for. It's the moments that I will give an example. For as Black people, watching my grandmother see Obama win a presidency, the look in her face of success, the peace in her voice, just a small moment. But that moment is what we long for. But for it to be continuous, like, wow, something has happened and everyone agreed and we're okay. We're not on fire. They're not killing us. This moment is beautiful for all of us. And that is, I think, the measurement. It's not a piece of paper. It's in the heart of, we all feel at peace. We all feel good. That's what equity is about. It's about no one feeling like they've been left out. That's what it's about.
I think from my network of people, which would be white people, but also that there are still people that would be threatened by what you just said.
Absolutely.
And I'm hoping more people who look like me and in my network would see that as also a beautiful moment of peace.
Yeah. Well, I think the threat becomes a person's reality when they haven't recognized the beauty of all winning. We have a nation that has been built on only a few get to win, and we've been okay with that. The movement is that's not enough anymore. So the threat is really just moving away from what you know and all the comforts of that, right? That's just a very uncomfortable thing to do for anyone, Black, white, and indifferent. It's a very uncomfortable thing to do something that you don't normally do. But it also, in my experience, anytime I have really taken a leap of faith, I have found all types of messages in the mess. I have found growth. I have found peace. I have found opportunity when I do it differently. And I'm open to that instead of just, no, this is just how we do it. This is how we do it. Those things are harmful. And we can tell from our history that even if you have won in all those things, that's how we do it. If there are people who have been harmed, then even your win is really not a win. It's just not. And when we all can really feel that, like, oh man, I'm winning, but whoa, this whole county is losing. This doesn't feel good. When we can understand that feeling, then we win. I understand in America, it's the land of the, opportunity. And if you work hard enough, you do all that stuff sounds really good. But the reality is there's lots of people who look like me who work really hard and never get opportunity. Something's wrong with that.
I hope you write a book someday. I hope you write music or something, because what you just said, I'd love to. We should quote that whole thing: winning for all, when not being okay that only few can win, or when everybody wins and no one was harmed.
Yeah, no one. Is your win helpful or harmful? I tell my kids that all the time. And I'm not the one, like, let me be very clear.
Maybe I'm going to write a book. I'm going to just quote you and write a book.
And I want to be clear. I was an athlete, so I believe in winners and losers. I'm not the one that gives a trophy to everyone either. I'm not that person. But I also know that even if in a game, when I won a game, I was the person that not only shook hands, but talked to the people that maybe lost against me. I was not the one that kicked you when you're down and, oh, when I get the newspaper article, I'm going to make sure I talk about you and just how terrible you were. Not helpful. It's just not helpful. But that's what we do figuratively for most of the things in our country. We win and we kick people.
And sometimes knowingly and sometimes not.
Absolutely.
Maybe.
Oh, I think that there's a lot of people who are unconscious about it. But unconsciousness is also a choice. There's a level of unconsciousness that you choose to not dive into this little feeling of something doesn't feel right. And you train yourself to ignore that over and over again, and that muscle gets really strong. Then all of a sudden your unconsciousness becomes, well, I just didn't know. It becomes your excuse. I don't believe that unconsciousness is forever. I believe you can change that if you choose to.
That's where I was. Straight up.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, I kind of started making noise after George Floyd.
Right.
And tried to say the right thing. Mm-hmm. And was supported for it, by the way. Received very, very, very little feedback that was negative. Mm-hmm. Didn't really ever get verbally attacked by anybody, anything like that. And the thing that I heard other people say, and I realized it was true for me. I didn't get told this by anybody, but maybe it was like a late night, maybe it was Jimmy Fallon or somebody who would have said something like, well, welcome to the party. Good job that you now see what's going on. And it might have even been my good friend Burke Nelson too, who said something along the lines of, I should not have to explain this again and again and again to my white ally friends because it's been so obvious for so long. Welcome. Yes, great. But where you been?
Right. So,
boy, some of that stuff hits really hard on this side of that, especially when you're trying to do right. Mm-hmm. But, a lot of this stuff, you said the word comfort. A lot of this stuff is not comfortable. A lot of the process that it takes to go through this transition, this transformation you're talking about as people begin to wake up to what's happening, mm-hmm. It's not comfortable. And very few people are willing to put themselves in a position of not being comfortable intentionally. And full circle here, that's what Alf That's what health does for people. Stick you in a place, make you uncomfortable, shake you up a little bit. Now, how do you feel?
And then throw you back.
Process that. And it's a very, in my opinion, it's a very healthy thing to do. And it's opened up a whole brand new stream of understanding and learning for me in my entire life that I hope will carry on forever.
Yeah. So to me, this is where I advocate for youth education to be different, right? Because really, if we taught kids about the concept of overcoming challenges, the concept of healing when, you know, you're in these uncomfortable situations, and the concept of not being unconscious, these are all teachable things, right? And unfortunately, we wait until we're adults to then say, oh, by the way, this is what you should be doing in order to overcome those challenges and to be more conscious and to be more woke, as they say today. All these things can be taught earlier. And when we talk about interrupting racism, that's part of it. There's many facets, right? Like there's so many pieces to it. But if we just teach kids that it's normal to not know, it's normal to be uncomfortable, it's normal to overcome challenges, and here are some steps that you can start looking at on how to do it, then when they get older and they reach these barriers or these obstacles, it's not so uncomfortable to make a switch.
I am a little bit distracted only because I'm checking to make sure we're still on. I may need you to repeat some of what you just said for me to continue that line of thinking, which I am so thankful to know that it's still on. Like we're on Facebook, okay? It's working. I'm really glad because my screen is totally frozen. I can't do all the normal things I would like to do. Thankfully, my face isn't frozen in one of those really, really embarrassing poses, although it's not that flattering. And I'm trying to see, like normally we'd be able to see comments from people and be able to interact, and I kind of can't.
Let me see.
What's that?
I'm gonna see if I can see anything online.
Yeah, no, I'm frozen, pulling on my neck, and you are vibrant and spectacular. But at least people are still hearing us. I'm very glad. So this might be the best way to. I'm a radio guy. So this may be the best way for me to be presenting to people right now, is a frozen face and just my voice. I don't really know. But you brought it full circle when you talked about youth education. Libra is the COO of Self Enhancement Incorporated. And also, by the way, a school board member of the North Clackamas School District.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Which, bless you, because I'm a Roseburg City Councilor. I told you before, I think school boards actually are more difficult to be on than even a city council. So good for you. And thank you for your volunteer service, which also people forget it's a volunteer job.
They do forget that.
Youth education. So I've heard we are currently bringing up the most diverse generation we've ever had. That must give you some hope. And I just wonder how are they interacting? Like, I mean, if seeing other kids of various, black and brown kids are hanging out with white kids and they're understanding each other at a younger age, hopefully that will just grow kids up so that racism isn't necessarily built in. Can we break it down because of that diversity at a young age?
Yeah, I think it will help. I think it's always helped, right? Through the years, children's interactions with difference has also changed their approach to life, right? I think that it's an opportunity. It gives me hope. But I'm also really aware that those kids go home, and many of the households are not believers of diversity, or not lovers of difference, and would prefer things to stay the same. And so that challenges a child, because then they have to choose between what they're experiencing at school and what their family that they love is telling them. So, at some point the rubber meets the road and they'll make a decision. And I hope that in their experiences at school that they'll make a good decision. This is why it's important that school districts do emphasize equity and inclusion and diversity, so that they can at least see that lens. Once a kid is exposed to something, they have more of an opportunity to be different. But if they're never exposed to it, then the challenges come later in life where they have to learn it at an older age, which can be more complicated for them.
Yeah, and as much as we in Southern Oregon look at Portland and say, wow, the diversity, you're saying there's still only 2% African American people of color in Oregon, right?
In all of Oregon.
So that whole thing of how many kids actually are seeing people that don't look exactly like them in their classrooms, and the numbers are coming up. I mean,
Yeah.
we are seeing a Spanish-speaking Latinx, if you will, population continuing to grow here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a higher number in schools than it is among our general population.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so, at least that's happening. But yeah, I think about the kids in my backyard and the opportunities they have to see people of color and understand them and grow to respect them, and just hope that there are enough influences out there that that can happen.
I agree.
And we can move that ball.
That is the hope. That is the hope. And again, I always say kids are not our challenge. Kids see things from the purest place in their heart, right? It's all of the experience that happened between childhood and adulthood and the people around them that either fortify helpfulness and less harmful experiences or not, that really, really determine the outcome for that kid. And it's important for us to all step up, because sometimes some parents or some families just can't do it. They don't have the lens or the resources or the ability. And so it's important for us all to step in, because like I said, they may be your next president. So step up now.
Final thoughts here. What kind of message do you want to get out? Maybe you just did right there. You've dropped massive knowledge. I'm gonna have to watch this and take notes to even understand. Which I had to do, by the way, with Between the World and Me. I had to read that and like make notes and put the book down and then come back to it later. If you haven't read it by Ta-Nehisi Coates, it's amazing. And everybody should read it. But same thing here. I feel like that much knowledge has been stuck in my head here, Libra. I love this conversation. What kinds of things do you want to sort of throw out there as we get toward the end of our conversation to feedback out there into the atmosphere among some of the things that we've talked about?
Yeah. Yeah, it really comes down to one thing for me, and that is I would love for our world of humans to find a way to connect deeper with their hearts. I think that if we could just, as individuals, make that commitment, it would be that much harder for you to do crimes of the mind. And I just think that that's the beginning of it. As individuals, you have to do the work. You have to. And the work does not come from you going online and looking up things that fall within your algorithm, that whatever you've been thinking is just going to keep you thinking that. It takes really reflecting on your life and doing the hard work so we can stop committing these terrible crimes of the mind, which are harmful for our nation.
It's very good. That's very good. Libra Forde, COO, Self Enhancement Inc. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you very much for just the time and the time it took to just have these pre-conversations to get here. You can learn more about the work of Self Enhancement Inc. at selfenhancement.org. Yep. Also, I've been wearing T-shirts on the show that you can pick up at speakupwithus.com. Speakupwithus.com. There are several messages on T-shirts. We're hoping to have you be out there stirring up conversations without actually having to say a word. Speakupwithus.com. You can find out more also about ALF, the American Leadership Forum, at alforegon.org. Yeah. All right. Well, normally I would wrap this up and hit the stop button, but my browser's broken, so I'm going to have to probably reset my computer while I watch Facebook and hope that it turns off. This has been one of the most successful broadcasts of Interrupting Racism because my face hasn't moved for the past 25 minutes, which fans of the show are saying, all right, excellent. But I'd be smiling broadly right now I feel your passion. I feel your compassion. I feel so much just being able to talk to you and connect with you. And I think you're amazing. So thank you very much again, Libra, for coming on the program.
And it takes one to know one. So thank you very much for that.
All right. Well, Interrupting Racism will be back again soon. You can check us out on Facebook and also on YouTube, see the past interviews that we've done, and check back in again the next time you see the program. And in the meantime, every chance you get, I would hope, if you get the opportunity, that you would also do your best to interrupt racism. Thanks for being with us. Thank you, Libra. I hope you have a good afternoon.
You too.
Okay, I'm going to turn my computer off. Let's see if it fixes what's broken out there. Anyway, bye-bye, everybody.